gentlemen, I would like to welcome a wonderful poet, a great storyteller, a wise man of the first order, Mr. Richard Harries. Richard, welcome.
Hello, I'm very glad to be here.
Well, Richard, I invite artists on to Poets of the East because I like to understand a little bit about what drives them, where they're from, what were the beginnings of this artist. Because I see the wonderful fruit that is your current art, but I'm always intrigued. What's the story behind the story? So, would you talk a minute or two about young Richard, the lad, the schoolboy? When
Well,
did you start creating?
I grew up in the north of England in a quite posh little town called Harrogate, and uh, my life was very much affected because my mother died of cancer when I was 13.
Oh no.
And my father remarried within weeks to a dreadful woman. So a lot of my poems are about that time in my life, are really quite sad ones, and therapeutic, cathartic ones. And uh, so it was really a devastating time in my life, and does provide quite a lot of my material. Uh, then I grew up, got married, and I've been married for 48 years now, to the same lady. And that greatly enriched my life. And we had two children, and now we've got grandchildren. And all those things do influence my work. My work is very varied. I mean, I can write about depression or homelessness, but then I also write about my granddaughters, and I have enough for a volume of children's poems, which I hope will be published in 2 years' time. And they do feature my grandkids quite extensively. Um, One of my very first really successful poems that people loved was about a game of pirates that my granddaughters Izzy and Lara and I play. And there are quite a few of those poems. There's about five or six, and people do love them. But so things like that come into my work as well.
I was going to ask, did you start writing when you were a teenager, or did you really find yourself a writer later in life?
Much later in life, just as I was on the point of retiring about 13 years ago. I was sort of heading for 60. I was 57, 58. And I was working for a local council, and we had outsourced all the grass cutting, and it was a nightmare. Everything went wrong. And when I'd left the team, because I was the sort of report writer, one of the lads sent me Wordsworth's daffodils and asked me to turn it into a piece of scandalous doggerel, attacking attacking the company that we employed. And I did that. And I mean, I've suppressed it now. It wasn't libelous; it was all true. But I got so much fantastic reaction from people within the council, people I didn't even know were emailing me saying this was a hilarious poem. And about that time, I'd moved into planning control, and my boss was a lady who went to Paris, and her boyfriend went down on one knee on the top level of the Eiffel Tower and proposed. And I wrote a poem about that, and we sent it in the middle of the office card. And again, I had this explosion of people who I hardly knew or didn't know, either walking up to me or emailing me telling me that I'd got a marvelous talent. And I thought, oh, well, that's happened twice now. And so I started writing poems, and I really had no idea why. And some of them were anecdotal, and some of them weren't. But they were all fairly trivial. And I retired and we came to Withensea, which is on the east coast, a tiny little Victorian town. And there's nearby a folk club, and my wife wanted to go, so off we went. And there were people doing monologues, but they were by British writers like Marriott Edgar and Kenneth Williams, who you probably don't know over there, but they were sort of famous and on the radio. And anyone under 40 wouldn't know what these things were. So they thought these people had written them. And I thought, this is not very good. Next time I come, I'll bring mine. And I did. And Pirate Izzy was amongst them. And I got thunderous applause. And I thought, oh, they like me. And somebody asked me if I'd go to an open mic. Well, I didn't even know what open mics were. So I went the following Tuesday to an open mic at a little village, tiny village called Roos. And it went down very well there, the things that I did. And a young lady who was only about 14 or 15, but is now quite famous in the UK as a singer-songwriter, she asked me if I'd come to an open mic at a club on Holderness Road in Hull, which is about an hour away, and it's a busy city. And so off I went there, and met the most marvelous people. And a lot of the people who now write songs from my poems and who I work with a lot were there. And of course, I was like a grandfather figure to most of them because they were like 19 to 20. Within a couple of weeks, I got a phone call saying, would I come to the Freedom Festival, which is a major thing in Hull, because William Wilberforce, who introduced the anti-slavery bill, was the mayor of Hull and also an MP. And so it's very much a freedom centre. We've got museums about slavery and things like that. And so within about 5 weeks of standing on the stage for the first time, I found myself in a large marquee facing vast amounts of people. And when I got there, I got a message saying, would I come to the recording studio? So I did that. And they said, we've heard this Pirate Izzy poem. Would you record it for us? And I said, certainly. So I recorded Pirate Izzy. That year, which now would be about 10 years ago, if you went into the centre of Hull and picked up the telephone in a telephone box, you didn't get the dialing tone. You got me saying, we were sitting on the old brown settee, Grandpa, Izzy, Lara and me. And this was sort of a feature that there was me on the phone. So it was very much like spaghetti all mixed up, one thing leading to another. But it was only about 5 weeks from thinking I might perform to being in the middle of it all, and it's just carried on like that ever since. It was very organic and unplanned and accidental, and I didn't have any ambition at that point to get published. But about 7 years ago, I went to an event at the York Literature Festival. I think it was at the Theatre Royal, and there were lots of well-known poets there, and we all performed 2 or 3 poems. And at the end of it, Rose Drew, who is now my publisher, said, well, this is because she's American, so this is my bad American accent. She said, well, hasn't it been a wonderful event, and you've all been marvellous on top of your form, but it's been a stunning day, and I want to just say Richard's poem about male breast cancer was wonderful. And then I expected her to mention all sorts of other people, but I got like the only honorary mention. So afterwards, when there were sort of nibbles and drinks, I went up to her and said, well, would you like to publish me? And she said no. And it went on for several years, and I know her very well. And I've been to lots of events that she runs and that she goes to. And eventually I was asked to perform on BBC Radio Humberside, which is, our local BBC, but it's still a BBC that can be heard all over the world on the internet. And I was asked to perform 20 minutes on there, and so I agreed. And it was a huge success, and people did love the show. I was the only poet there. There was a rap band. There was all sorts of people, and I was the only older artist. Everyone else was under 25, and the next day she contacted me and said, "Now we'll publish you." So that happened. And it was lovely that it actually came from her, not just me boring her into submission. So, and she has now publicly said 3 times in my presence that the book that came out in February 2021 called Awakening was their biggest selling title of the year. So that's amazing. I would have been,
Wonderful.
as long as I wasn't the least selling, I would have been quite happy. I would have been quite happy to be number 20 or something, you know. But so, and she's announced it 3 times, so it must be so, you know. And she stood in front of the microphone and said that. So
Mhm.
that's why my second book, which is out roughly now, I've got the proof copies, and I think on Amazon it goes live on the 1st of November. So I think that may be the publication date. So I'm very happy to have that. So a second book, and I'm 70. You know, I was 68, nearly 69 when the first book came out, and to get first published at that age is, I think, unusual, because there's lots of older poets like yourself who are published but have been for many years, you know, and a lot of people of my age started writing poetry much sooner and have had books out for 20 and 30 years or longer, you know. So I'm really quite well, I'm delighted. I'm not quite anything. I'm absolutely delighted.
Well, how nice. Speaking of your new book coming out, Iconic Tattoo, that'll be available in November. Uh, Look at that. Look at that. Very nice. Very nice. Now, is that a uh, an imagined constellation, or is that a real constellation?
It's like most of my poems. Most of the poems in the book are um, real and anecdotal, although I do write fiction as well. The iconic tattoo was about 4 years ago. Um, I had a hip replacement, being a man of a certain
So
age.
you're
And
even
when,
hipper than you were before.
oh yes, I'm told it's the strongest joint in my body. It's made of what is it made of? I can't remember now. But anyway, um, uh, I want to say platinum, but it can't be platinum, can it?
Titanium, maybe.
I, pardon?
Titanium.
Titanium, that's what it is. And apparently, I've got a barcode. Um, I had to sign the barcode register, so if I go through an airport machine, they can tell. They don't need to look at your passport, or you know, they can tell from
Right,
your
right. It's not the
barcode.
strangest weapon known to man. It's my hip.
Yes. So when I woke up, I was sort of drugged up with morphine and what have you. And this extremely muscular young man, about 24, was my physio, and he was wearing the tightest t-shirt possible with bulging muscles, but he was completely covered in tattoos. And from his wrist to his inner elbow was this large tattoo of a Pierrot, a French clown. And I looked at it and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's a tattoo." I said, "I know that, you fool. Even in this drugged up state, I know it's a tattoo. But what is it?" Because I thought it was Twiggy from the film, the Ken Russell film, The Boyfriend. I thought it was her image during that sequence. And he said, "It's some bird from the 60s." And I thought, you know,
That's what I just said.
I can understand you having Barbara Streisand because you love her, or Leeds United because you love them, or an anchor because you love sailors, or whatever. But actually, to have an image, an iconic image on you, and you have no idea what it um, is really strange. And so the next day, I told him all about her, you know. And since then, the year after that, she got made a dame, so she's now Dame Leslie Hornby. But I just thought the whole thing was so bizarre and puzzling. And I write out of what I call emotion, but it could be shock, it could be joy. And this time it was just really out of puzzlement. And I had been considering calling the book The Confession of the Rose, The Confusion of the Rose. And that's a poem which is in the book about me going out into the garden on Christmas Day, which traditionally in England is very severe weather. And it was snowy and it was frosty. And I had a beautiful rose out in bloom, which I really shouldn't have done. And it looked most peculiar, covered in white. And so that made me think of the changing seasons and what man has done to the planet. And so I wrote that as a poem. And I thought that would be a beautiful cover. And then I thought, and people will sadly think daffodils and Wordsworth. And in England or the UK, we have very limited curriculums. So they teach only certain poems. And one of the reasons why I think, although Wordsworth is a genius and I could not write lovely poetry like his, don't let me compare myself to him. But one of the problems is if you say to somebody who doesn't experience spoken word or poetry, that you write poems or that you're going to perform them, they assume that you're going to talk about daffodils and hyacinths and snowdrops. And they say, oh, poetry's not for me. And then I persuade them to listen to one of mine about falling downstairs or, that sort of thing. I've had people saying, "Oh, is that poetry?" Well, I like that. That was very funny. And so I thought, no, an old man with a rose on his poetry book is not a good idea, not if you wish to actually sell it. So I'm afraid I was a bit cynical, and I had selected the poems and I looked through it to see which was the most intriguing, attractive, and probably sellable. Because I mean, obviously, you're producing a book, so you want to sell it. You don't want to sell it to your two sisters and your wife or something, do you? You want people to read it. I just thought Iconic Tattoo is a wonderful title, and everyone's been intrigued and wanted the story. And my illustrator is Jim Danby, who's a singer-songwriter, and he's a lovely man and one of my best friends. And he illustrated the first book, and I knew he'd have a ball doing this one. Now, we haven't illustrated it as Twiggy, it's just A Piero, because it was pointed out to us that someone like MGM owns the copyright. So if you actually illustrated from that film, you could infringe them. Not, I think, that they'd come after me, but I don't know. They might do. Somebody might alert them. There might be an algorithm. And so, yes, it's just a general Piero. It's not actually illustrated as Twiggy herself. But yeah, so that's me nearly up to date.
Then let me ask you, could you read one of the poems from this new up and coming book?
Yes, would you like a funny one or would you like a serious one?
Sir, it is entirely up to you. I like to let my poets fulfill their wishes.
Um, right. I've just got to put my glasses on. I've had cataract surgery,
You
and
have
so
time for that?
I don't have proper glasses, not with a prescription, and I've got these cheap £2 things because my prescription ones are too strong for me now. All right, I'll do Beautiful Me. It's quite a fun one. I only put one comedy into Awakening because with me, the voice and the inflection and the waving of the arms is all part of it. And I wasn't sure that it would work on the written page. But the one that I put in the first book, I've had so much lovely reaction to, and people say it really does work. So here's another comedy, but there are very serious things in here as well. It's not just a comedy book. And it's called Beautiful Me. I am so lucky me. I am so attractive, sexy. And now I am 70, still have that great appeal. I know this must be so because on Facebook, so often I have young, beautiful, and often bare breasted women asking to be my friend. And it's all because of my great looks and sex appeal. They tell me so. They say they want, yes, to have sex with me. At first, it was mainly from Asia, but now it's from everywhere. They tell me they want to meet me. All it will take is for me to send them the money for the flight, or even just my bank details. I must have greatly improved with age, that I did not have this problem in my 20s, women crawling all over me to get to my body. And it's not just my body they're after. They've seen my kind eyes, looked into them, and seen my generous soul. They've had their villages destroyed by a hurricane or by volcanic eruption, and they just know that I will want to pay to rebuild them. They just Google sexy man. Now, not being totally stupid, nor yet having dementia, I block the bastards, because they might, not only will they be thieves after my cash, but they might also be male, 80, syphilitic, and called Stan. Of course, things can go wrong, as a friend got such a request from a woman he did not know, pretty and smiling, so blocking seemed to be the way to go. Turns out it was his stepsister's daughter he'd not seen for years. Whoops. Now, if only he was not so damned attractive too. And that goes down well wherever I do. It's a recent one. I inserted it into the book, along with a Black Lives Matter poem that it's very important to me. And so I added those into the book sort of at the last stages when you're editing, because I wanted something current, because I compiled it over a year ago, and obviously I've written a lot in that year. So I wanted two important to me ones. And the funny story is that last Sunday I was performing in a pub in Hull, and it's the sort of performance which is all music, but between the acts, they like me to go on. It's because they're my friends from the Rain Club. They don't advertise for a per. It's just me. They'll stick between the acts when I walk in. And my first set, there were quite a few people talking. It was packed. There were about 60 people in the pub. It was okay, because if you're performing in a general pub, not at a poetry event, you will get talking. People are joining together for the first time in months, and you can't be precious. But I had a microphone so I could be heard, and about half the people in the pub were listening and enjoying it, and I was more than happy with that. Then the second time I went up between acts, I started with that. And, I Am So Sexy Me starts it, or something like that. And everyone shut up. Everyone. And I mean, they talked through the music. So, and nobody spoke. People that were in the middle of a sentence stopped, and they all listened. And I had been going to do another one from the book called The Weathered Old Tree, which is just a sentimental old thing about old age. So I soon ditched that, and because I've got a phone and not paper, I could just dial up another risque one. So I did that, and for the two poems, it was so respectful, and so it was kind of a little triumph that. There's lots of sort of chattering women who were in groups and men who were fairly drunk, and so wow, it was pretty extraordinary that they shut up and listened. And somebody hugged me on my way off the little stage and said, "I didn't think you had it in you, lad." So that was really nice. It was a lovely memory. You have good memories from some performances, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to read a serious one too, sir?
Well, I'll read George Stinney, if I may, which is the Black Lives
Please.
Matters one, which is, very dear to my heart. And at the time that the guy was murdered in America that caused all the riots, I'm probably going to get his name wrong. Is it George Foreman? No, it's not George Foreman.
Close. George Floyd.
Yes, George Floyd. The other guy makes pans or something, didn't he? Was a boxer.
Yeah.
Like everyone else, I was amazed and disgusted and appalled by this. And as you do, I started Googling, and this case came to my attention. It's called George Stinney. In 1944, which seems so long ago, but it is within my sister's lifetime and just 8 years before I was born, in America, the land of the free, a 14-year-old black boy was executed for the murder of two little girls. He was placed in the electric chair, had to be seated on a large Bible, used as a booster seat, he was so small. The girls were battered to death. Their bodies were dumped in a ditch. The boy was George Stinney. He had spoken to them that day as they passed his house. He directed them to where they could pick certain flowers. That was all that was proven. He was arrested and taken from his parents, allowed no solicitor, even though the Sixth Amendment guarantees him one. Allowed no visits from his family. They could not agree on the description of the murder weapon, and there was no blood found on George. At the trial, his counsel was a white politician campaigning for election in a town full of hatred where lynching was threatened. He cross-examined by no one. George was alibied by his sisters, which they still swear is the truth. Yet this is so close in time that some of the witnesses are still alive. The trial lasted just 81 days after the murder, lasted 1.5 hours. The all-white jury were out 10 minutes. 1,000 whites packed the courtroom, not one black person allowed in. George was not allowed to see his parents until after his conviction in America, the land of the free. At the trial, they allowed discussion of rape and even necrophilia, even though post-mortems pronounced the girls to be virgins. The trial papers have disappeared, as has an alleged confession, one made by a 14-year-old boy deprived of contact with parents or counsel. They killed him with a too large hood that allowed the tears flowing to be seen. His dad was allowed to approach and to speak to him just before he died, the only family contact he had had since his arrest. This was in 1944 in America. He was buried in an unmarked grave. 70 years later, the conviction was overturned for lack of evidence of being tainted with racism. They never found the murder weapons. How could a child hide metal objects so thoroughly? He could not. A real murderer ran free while they murdered another child. This was in America. George died because he was black. If anyone can't comprehend why Black Lives Matters, why we need to take the knee, they should research George Stinney. No one says that other lives do not matter. What they say in America, in particular, there is good reason to fear your early death if you are black, and that should never have been and can no longer be. And when I finished that, I can't perform another poem, I just find it too emotional, and I can't start talking about piracy or carrots or falling downstairs or anything. And if I have to time that to be the final poem, because yes. I was just aghast. I just couldn't
Richard,
comprehend it at first.
Let me share one of mine on that same theme. As you say, sadly, racism remains a moving force in our culture. Many of us understand that it comes from a dark past, but unfortunately, folks of color, people who look a little different, still suffer these same kinds of insults and at times death. There was a case when I was a young man living in Miami where a businessman, a professional, was out having some fun on his motorcycle, and he was accosted by police, beaten to death. The police tried to hide the crime, but it all fell apart when it turned out that this was not a poor man. This was not a disenfranchised person. This was a businessman. He just happened to be black. And I was so sad that this was still possible. This was back in the 1970s. And I thought, why doesn't someone, an anthropologist, a behaviorist, why don't they explain that while it's a normal biological thing to recognize people in your group, people outside your group, or for that matter, it's a normal biological thing to recognize your tribe. Why isn't it explained? But it can be explained in a sense that those differences can be seen for what they are: a charming, alternative to what is, the standard model, if you will. The standard model comes in all kinds of colors and all kinds of shapes. So I wrote this. It's called A Behaviorist Perspective, The Causes of Racism. The troop or group, the clan's glad hand, the sign of 9, the grip in the dark, the posted mark informs the stable state of norms. Remembering the frames of membrane games, brain disguises, shade your eyes in apple pies, it sizes the territory, the turf. The good should, our side of town, our group is right, in the sight of good God's smile. Even sunlight reviles your kind, outside the pure, to lure with your kind's lazy, stupid stunts. A sparrow of a different hue could be torn and clove in two by a few of another blue hunt. The strength, bonding, unicellular life in multicellular strife, responding, besiding, ties the atoms so tight, minute, molecular might, and chooses in precise measure who you'll sleep with tonight. Beehives survive by tribes' trance. The queen's romance excludes the rude outsider, protects the provider, determines the rider of the queen's desire, embolden invaders, reduce the chance for the tribe to advance. Social groups and bamboo shoots, baboon troops and fishy schools know who the foe is, when to go, who's the friend, where's the end. The rules used, training fools by gene and team wish, that's culture's dish. It keeps the Portuguese man of war banging on the door. It explains to the colony who hang on to and why. Cultural clash, like red ants and black as a reason to attack, is a common step to keep hep to good guys and bad. But isn't it sad how often the supportive social ties, the tools of molecular rules, can conceal the lack and leak of the social contract to the greater stack? The organs of your hand would be foolish to war or inflict harm on the arm.
Yes, I mean, I know a lady. Well, she's no longer with us, but she had some form of dwarfism, and she had a very thick neck. I mean, she wasn't overweight or anything. This was the way she was born, and she had limited mobility. And she got married and had a perfectly productive life. She worked and she was a lovely lady. And she would tell me that she would go into a cafe and have people staring at her or moving their children so they didn't have to face her. And it was just unbelievable. But I believe her because she was a really truthful, nice lady. And she had to put up with that all her life, and people treated her as though she shouldn't be out in public or something, as though they shouldn't have to look at her, and that's just, well, it's vile, but it's extraordinary, isn't it? And she said, "Oh, it happens, and I just stare back at them. I've steeled myself now. If they stare at me, I look at them back." She said, "I won't look away and I won't hide." But to move your child away because they can't see it, so they won't see a disabled person, that just seems. And of course, what does that teach the child? That these people shouldn't be looked at because their physical appearance would upset you. Extraordinary. I feel a poem coming on.
Sure.
Sorry.
Well,
Yes,
we know that
yes, that's
fashion.
how poems happen, isn't it? You get all emotional and start talking about something else, and you think, well, why haven't I written about her now? You know, and yes, I probably will. So watch
There
out
we
for book
go.
3.
Not
So
only some of your past work, but we've got a taste of a future piece. You want to read
yeah,
one final one, sir?
yes. Well, I mentioned the confusion of the rose, so I'll read that. And this is because of the rose that was out in my garden completely covered in frost on Christmas Day. I am confused. Things are strange. I sleep most of the year, but in June I then bloom with my flowers beautiful, full of colour and fragrance. Then my petals fall and I return to sleep. This has been my fate for centuries. Life is good and regular usually. In recent years I stare and am disturbed. My birds develop in spring, in autumn and even winter. I feel so odd, flowering midst frost, sleet and especially snow. What has happened to the world? What has caused this madness? These are not halcyon days. Life and the planet has changed. Something has altered the climate. The planet itself, it's not the plants, it's not the birds and the beast. The only other thing I know is humankind. It can't be their fault, this disorder, can it? And oddly, that's been turned into a song by a very good friend, Carrie Martin. And I now find it difficult to read it as a poem and not burst into her tune, you know. It's fun trying to remember how to perform it, because I now hear it quite frequently because I've got a CD with it on, which is in aid of a charity that we sponsor, and so I hear that quite a lot. And so, you know, I want to say with the tune and the rhythm. So there you go. So it's on Stairwell Books of York. It's on their website. You can Google that. And it will be live on Amazon on the 1st of November. Yes.
Okay, and tell them the name once more.
Iconic Tattoo.
Wonderful.
And if you
Thank
want the
so much.
previous, and if you want the previous one, it's called Awakening. And that's an environmental poem too. It's a theme throughout my work, is man's destruction of the planet, because it's all around us, isn't it? You know, it's just a nightmare. In the UK, this government, the Tories, have allowed water companies to put sewage into our rivers and seas. So you know, we've had decades and decades and decades of controlling pollution in rivers and the ocean. And now they've just reversed that for profit, because that would cost the companies who are Tory sponsors, that would cost the companies money. So they'd rather we had a poorer quality of life and danger. And it's just disgusting, you know. So things like that are frequently reflected in my work, but I do cheerful things as well.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. It's been a real pleasure visiting with you. And best of
Thank
luck
you
on the
very
new
much
book.
indeed. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome two incredible characters, artists, producers, poets, authors, characters of just extraordinary talent, Lu-Shien Tan and my dear, dear friend, Kemlyn Tan Bappe, two wonderful, wonderful artists. Thank you for joining me for Poets of the East. I gotta ask, you've just had this incredible trip to Asia, touching bases with friends and making new contacts, performing on what I'm gonna guess 24 stages, and then you just got back from New York. You must be exhausted. I'm gonna shut up now and let me say, Kemlyn, how the heck are you?
I'm just so excited to be here again. Rick, it was so lovely to be interviewed by you and be a part of the Poets of the East show. Props to you. I enjoyed sharing it with my friends and people who were curious about my story. So thank you for that. It's great to be back. And what a whirlwind. I have my brother down there to thank, because he thought that that was good incentives for me to heal and get better and get stronger. And lo and behold, I did. And I'm just super proud to be here and to be able to say that I survived a 40-day tour, including, hopefully, you know, you can see that he survived me as well. And yes,
Well,
we just got
you
back from.
seem, from a friend's perspective, from a fellow producer and colleague of literary arts, you seem to have come back just wonderfully charged up. So that's wonderful. He had a great idea. It was good for you both, it seems. And Lu-Shien, sir, educator, producer, poet, artist, author. How was this whirlwind month for you?
It began as an audacious idea to bring Kemlyn on tour, believing that something substantial and mission appropriate for my organization would occur. And this was 3 months before we actually flew together. And in that 3 months, lo and behold, we booked several substantial events that absolutely were mission critical. And what's amazing is when Kemlyn and I separated, I continued in the month of August to travel Europe and Brazil. And it feels like it hasn't stopped. Our creative collaboration has continued. When we gathered in New York City, it felt like we hadn't been apart.
And we really haven't been apart, because when we're not in the same physical space, Lu-Shien and I are in very close contact via emails and messaging, as well
video
as
calls.
calls. Yeah. So I mean,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, so we're true collaborators that way, which is one of the reasons why, I mean, in the past I would have felt really comfortable representing Q's Blue World by myself, but it's just so exciting to have a collaborator, a true collaborator. And I said, we can't do this interview without my brother, because he's as huge of a part of QBW now than as I am. And Q's Blue World is our production company. And we call it a production company because that's sort of what we do right now. But it is really an imagination of two people who really want to model collaboration and invite other creatives to play with us and to work with us. And hopefully in recognizing the childlike, playful characteristics in each human being that we meet, we can be a part of a movement where people are learning to play again.
Well, I absolutely salute you both. I can only imagine the rigors of traveling as far as you traveled, plus with the kind of always one eye on the whole COVID situation, the changing political situations. You were in and out of some pretty volatile areas. I'm very much in awe of what it must have taken to put that trip together. Let me ask you, Lu-Shien, I know a little bit about your lovely sister and all of her art. Can I ask you, sir, in addition to your producing and writing, do you primarily use what I'm going to call a multimedia voice, or do you also do text? Do you also do painting? Or I know you do dance as well. Talk just a minute about your own art and this amazing amalgam that is Q's Blue World.
I think I now realize I produce art in response to a vibe I feel. And I didn't realize that because I thought everyone created art that way. I started off with calligraphy, just copying Old English texts because I thought they were intricate and beautiful. Eventually, I started extrapolating and creating fonts unique to people. I'll talk to people, get their personality, and I'll create a unique font just for them. And that it was very portrait-like because it was a one-off. And I would extrapolate a font for you. After that, my next artistic medium was music. And I learned to play the guitar, self-taught, acoustic and electric, played in a band. But again, what I wasn't the best musician, but I was told that I had an amazing sense for tone and texture and, again, the vibe. And then shortly after, I realized I really enjoyed moving intuitively. And I wouldn't call it dance, because a lot of dancers who become noteworthy are choreographed and they're very perfectionistic. Once again, it's the vibe. I move to communicate. And especially after surviving COVID in February 21, that was a very key way of rebuilding my body and my strength. And I lost the inhibition to dance at about the same time, and it's become a very key medium to express.
Well, I know in the Q's Blue World experiences that I've participated in my own small way, you often do an expressive dance as part of what you present. And I have a great admiration for you both, and you have my respect because I know all of those things that you do, how much energy, how much enthusiasm, and how hard you work to make these production come together. I've done both the performance part and the technical production part of things for enough years to know just how hard you work to make it look so smooth and easy. Believe me, you have my absolute respect.
And
And
what's
now,
remarkable, Rick, is when we were in New York, we decided to take the stage together when we were given an opportunity to present at the New York Cafe, arguably the most cherished spot in New York and probably the world. And without rehearsal, and with very little discussion, Kim and I selected a piece that we had loosely worked with. And when we took the stage, we intuitively responded to each other. And in the feedback of the audience, it was remarkably synchronized. Not intentionally, but we were. Kemlyn was doing her thing, I was doing my thing, but we were both on the same vibe. And therefore, we could not have choreographed it with more synchronicity.
awesome, awesome. Obviously, there's, in addition to that creative spirit, there is also a strong spiritual or philosophical component that makes that synchronicity possible. So it speaks so well of your spirit and of the kind of people that you are. It's tremendous. Now I understand you do want to show me some of your videos, but I'm going to ask you just delay one more minute. I need to ask my dear friend Kemlyn. Kemlyn, I can't imagine but that from this trip there are new creative things that have bubbled to the surface. And I won't ask you to talk a lot about it, but if you would just share one of the things that kind of that trip, that travel, those experiences brought to the surface in you as a creative artist.
I think one of the most precious things that I've learned is to learn to look at my audience a lot more, not just as individuals, but to scan my audience and to really look into their hearts and ask them, who are you? In what ways would you like to be seen by me? And how can I reach you with my song and my message and my love? And that has particularly was highlighted when I went to São Luís, Brazil, and learning to look and not shy away, be afraid of looking at people anymore. And now, when I was in New York, and it didn't matter whether I was on stage or off stage, I spent a lot more time looking at people, smiling, and asking those questions with my eyes. And that has been such a joy. So it's no longer a performative thing that I do, it is how I live.
Well, I have to ask one final question of you both, and then I'll let you share the videos. In this country, New York has one of the most significant stages, if you will, the most the largest, most important staging presentation space, short of Hollywood, I think. But New York is, quote, the place. It must have been so interesting having gone to Asia and to different cities in Asia and Brazil, and then take, if you will, taking the show on the road to New York to have that New York showcase. I'm guessing this was your first New York showcase together. Um, how interesting, what an interesting challenge, and what great spice to add to your art. You want to talk just a minute about the New York experience?
Oh, Lu-Shien, you're muted.
I think it's surreal because the first time we went to New York as QBW, it was in March. And at the time, we were just looking for network. We were looking for opportunities to perform. This time, it was clear that we were being curated. We were being installed. We were being partnered with enthusiasm. And it just highlighted to us how much we had grown together in 6 months.
In 6 months, Rick. In 6 months.
Excellent.
And we started, and I would say our primary partner was Jane Spoken Word and All Beyond Face. And this was so audacious. I said to Jane, here's all the budget I have left. If you could throw a party for yourself, where would you throw it? And she found her dear friend Trudy, who is the owner of 5C Cafe and Cultural Center. And it was so charming. And it wouldn't have been possible without Jane being the one to say, I want it there. And to the point of we wanted it so much to be a global show so that we could be a part, the rest of Q's Blue World and our friends in Between the Lines wanted to be a part of it. Lu-Shien teched the place without Wi-Fi. It was a miracle. Shen, tell us about the challenges of 5C and how you overcame it.
So I don't know if you realize this, but Manhattan with skyscrapers makes cell signal particularly challenging in most of the city. And so knowing that they did not have Wi-Fi, I chanced a roll of the dice by asking Jane and Albie to go down with their cell phone to see how the signal was. Lo and behold, they had 5 bars. Wow. And when we got there, our phones had 5 bars. So I tethered Albie's phone to my laptop. I got Kemlyn's phone focused on the audience and called it audience cam in Zoom. And then my phone was the speaker cam. And with those 3 cameras, including my laptop webcam, I could cut to 4 different cameras or simultaneously spotlight all 4 of them into a grid. And that was the way I broke the 4th wall for Zoom. And the ubiquitous feedback was getting to see the audience, live audience on Zoom, helped the Zoom people feel like they were part of the party.
That's tremendous, really tremendous.
Lu-Shien, is it possible at all to bring up the trailer reel that you created as well? So there are 3 pieces that we would like to bring to you, that Rick, that's critical. In fact, I wish that we had the 4th as well, because Lu-Shien, would you play even a portion of your post-COVID dance? Because this is super important to me. Lu-Shien is a survivor of COVID. And
of the Delta COVID. I caught it in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, where people around me were dying 3 days after symptoms presented. And I didn't have to go to hospital, even though I had a full-blown case of it.
Wow, good for you.
And his COVID was liquefying his muscles.
Oh my.
And my
I
brother,
lost
when
8 kilograms in 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's
16
about
pounds,
17 pounds,
17
18 pounds.
yeah, yeah. And when I saw my brother's legs, and I'm like, why aren't you moving your feet? And he says, I can't. And I'm like, I realized then I could really have lost my brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he sheltered it from most of us. But when I saw for myself in this video, his first dance again, that really moved me. So the first video you're gonna see is my brother's first dance, and you'll get that privy, and then we'll do a segue to our next video.
Okay. I think you should be able to share your screen.
O sol chegou, abriu as portas para um novo dia, fez nascer um pouco de paz, pintando o céu com várias cores. Venha ver se quiser sentir os encantos da nossa ilha, ilha. Um caminho, atalho pra ser feliz. Vem que eu vou te levar. Fecha os olhos e confia no amor, na paz que só Deus que promete te dar. Brilha até o sol se pôr e vem a noite com mais energia. No amor, na paz que só Deus que promete te dar. Brilha até o sol se pôr e vem a noite com mais energia. Naveguei pra lá, vi de longe o infinito. Perguntei pra um pescador se havia algum lugar mais bonito. Oh, pra cantar pra vocês, queria chamar especialmente nosso amigo irmão Zé Cavaleiro.
Já salve essa ilha. Venha ver se quiser sentir, sentir o suspiro da nova vida, vida. O caminho, o atalho pra ser feliz. Vem que eu vou te levar. Fecha os olhos e confia no amor, na paz. Só Deus que promete te dar. Brilha até o sol se pôr e vem a noite com mais energia. No amor, na paz. Só Deus que promete te dar. Brilha até o sol se pôr e vem a noite com mais energia. Naveguei pra lá, vi de longe o infinito. Perguntei pra um pescador se havia algum lugar mais bonito.
Ilha do amor,
G, Inês e Thais Tribal, muito obrigada para este canção. Thank you so much, Thais Tribal, J, Inês, for giving us a song, because you inspired my brother to dance again and bring back his healing. Now, Lu-Shien, tell us at this time, how did you meet Harries Tribal yet?
No, I had discovered Harries Tribal about a year before this because I had gone to Sao Luis, and Sao Luis favors reggae, and I liked Harries Tribal's version of reggae. And I just picked this song because it just carried me through my 2 weeks of COVID. And I shot this video in my COVID hotel in Portland, Maine.
Wow.
3 weeks after recovering and pronounced COVID-free, days after completing my trip to Sao Luis. I refused to go home. I went to Sao Luis after recovering, knowing that if I was inspired and have had my heart filled with creativity and spiritual energy, I would heal better. And so I did this video to force me out of my room to start recovering physically. I could not squat. If I were to bend my knees even 2 inches, I would drop to the floor at this point.
Really?
And
Wow.
I have come back from that point.
And tell us, the universe gave you a treat, because this summer we weren't even supposed to go to Brazil, but something
So
happened. Yeah.
because of scheduling issues, we chose to go to Sao Paulo and Sao Luis to show Kemlyn what I was experiencing. Hopefully it will catch on. And my contact and our co-collaborator, Pedro Lobo, said, you know what? High Street Ball's performing at an intimate hotel. You want to go see them? And I was like, yeah. And it was an intimate party because it rained and hardly anybody came. So they performed for us.
Wow, how nice.
And I got to tell them the story. I finally found this video and I sent it to them, tagged them, so they know the story now.
Excellent.
And not only that, they gave us an interview. Their special soloist, Hejiani Apaojo. Wow, we've become friends. So from people that Lu-Shien admired to becoming friends and working with us in partnership. What a wonderful tribute to your comeback, Lu-Shien. And the reason why, segue to our next video. Watchmen. Watchmen. Watchmen on the walls. Watchmen on the walls. Watchmen in the halls.
Very nice. I was going to ask, some of your motions seem to me reminiscent of Tai Chi.
Yes, when I channel the Asian movements, especially the spiritual ones, I do the Tai Chi movements because I think many of them are rooted in a spiritual expression.
Yeah. And even just simple energy motion, energy movement, if you will, moving the old chi, you know? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Lovely work. Lovely work.
And you can see Shen healing, you know, the difference between the first video and the second video.
Oh, yes. Much more vital. Sure.
Yeah. And I'm just really grateful for the healing that, you know, comes about when we are working on projects that really move our hearts, and that we have a message that we want to share, and we have partners that we can collaborate with. So the next piece that we wanted to show you is a collaboration that we did because we couldn't be in Japan. Rick, our friends in TKOO and Japan and Nagoya really wanted to, they created a show for us to physically be there. But we tried, we even postponed the Japan trip from the front end to the tail end. And the government, because of COVID restrictions, never opened their doors for us. And so that's why we ended up changing our itinerary from Japan, from Tokyo to Brazil. And so we decided to film something for them. And this is an homage to them. Shen, would you like to talk about it and Pedro Lobo's involvement?
Sure. And you mentioned earlier, Rick, about the Tai Chi reference. You will see the full send here, the strong Tai Chi reference because it's Japanese. The soundtrack at the end is an ancient Shinto chant, something I didn't realize when I curated it, but when we performed it earlier for TKOO, the people came back and said, "You don't understand how significant this is. This is our ancient mother chant, from which all of our Shinto religion comes from." And then Pedro, who produced the remarkable effects, had no idea that what he selected was symbolically the root of all of this spirituality. And he was blown away when we debriefed him, going, "You realize how significant, how apropos all of this is." So I give you Pain War Ascension.
Pain, 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 pain. Da me. Pain, pain, go away, come again another day. Little children want to play. Pain, pain, go away. Itami no itami kakeru betsu. No hi ni mata kimatsu. Chisana kodomo tachi wa asobidai. Itami no itami kakeru betsu. War. Bombs.
These are the stakes.
Empires.
We must either
Conflict.
love each other
Bullying.
or we must die.
Shooting. Depression. Suicide. Pain. Pain. Itami. Pain, pain, go away, come again another day. Little children want to play. Pain, pain, go away. Itami no itami kakeru betsu. no hinimata kimatsu chisana kotomodachi wa asobitai itami no itami kakeru betsu Jesu Domine, dona eis
I believe in no coincidences.
Oh, absolutely.
And I did not cue that last Om. That was the next YouTube track that was queued for us. And when I
Yeah,
stopped, and I was inside, I was panicking because it was not planned. But when I looked at the footage, it's like it looked intentional.
Oh, it was wonderful. And obviously, Mr. Lobos is sensitive to what you're saying beyond the words, beyond the motion. He's really got it. That's why those images that he chose were so apt for what even you didn't know. That's the proof stuff, you know.
And Rick, I had no idea what Lu-Shien was doing. We were filming together in two separate parts of the hotel room. In where were we, Shani?
I think we were in Cambodia.
We were in Cambodia, and we were filming in the same room, but we're in different parts, and there was a partition separating us so we could hear the music. But I had no idea what he was doing, and he had no idea what I was doing.
Well, and then I took on the posture of I am a kid missing somebody I loved who has moved on. And I put the camera underneath a glass topped bathroom scale so I could interact with it without stepping on my camera.
Right.
And it came together as a story. She became the apparition that had left, and I was missing her and calling her back.
And that was so apropos as well, because I mean, as siblings, both of us nearly lost our lives this last year. And at any given point, this could have been one of the possibilities that we were going to be mourning one another. And I mean, that's another thing, is that with my health challenges, it was really crazy for me to be going on this trip with my brother. Most people would say, are you kidding? You just nearly died and you're going out there for 40 days? Are you nuts?
Not to mention going to different cities with different, should we say, environments of infectious nature and germs and all that stuff. Wow. Well, it seems like it's borne wonderful fruit. You both have come back so beautifully and with such good, you know, they always say it's from the fruit that you know them. Well, the fruit that you both have been producing has been just absolutely remarkable. And I have to ask you one more question before I let you go. The next thing, what kinds of things are you thinking about doing next? You may not want to tell me, but I just have to ask, do you have any new
Perfect
projects?
segue, Rick. Perfect
segue for the next segment that we're going to play, and then we'll answer the question after the video.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
So you all need like warm coat, hat, gloves, because winter's definitely come to America.
Not Arizona anymore.
Climate change, baby. I turned on, tuned in, and dropped down in the 60s. I heard you. You can call me a freak, but don't call me a hippie. Spent the summer of love smoking weed, dropping acid, I protested a war that lasted and lasted. Released from the confines of satiety, brothers and sisters stood collectively in solidarity for dignity and equality. Because you know we don't. We demanded an end to war. Hell no, we won't go. We demanded civil rights for equality and dignity. We marched for all of humanity.
So that's an excerpt of Things to Come, Rick.
Excellent.
I really believe that we have learned to use technology to connect people and give them a taste of what's happening relationally. And I think we're not giving gifts randomly. I think we're supposed to utilize them for good.
Absolutely. Well, you guys are certainly doing absolutely wonderful work. My congratulations, my hats off to you both. Keep doing the wonderful things that you're doing. You're making the world a better place when you do. Thanks for joining me both, Lu-Shien and my dear Kemlyn. Congratulations, you're doing just amazing stuff. Thanks so much for coming on Poets of the East. Thanks again.
Bye for now.
Okay, bye-bye.